History is written by the victors. But what about those who didn't just lose, but vanished entirely? Across the world, there were once powerful civilizations that shaped trade routes, developed technologies, and influenced empires, only to disappear from the records, sometimes by conquest, other times by design. Who were they? Why were they erased? And how much of our world still carries the fingerprints of these forgotten powers? In this series, we journey into the unknown chapters of history, the shadow civilizations that time, war, and politics tried to erase. Our first stop, the windswept steppes of Central Asia, where an ancient enemy of China rose to imperial heights, then vanished from memory almost overnight. This is the story of the Xiongnu, an empire that dared to challenge the Han dynasty and may have changed the course of global history. Long before Genghis Khan, a fearsome nomadic empire ruled the steppes of Central Asia. The Xiongnu, often described in ancient Chinese chronicles as barbarians, were far more organized than that label implies. For centuries, they challenged the mighty Han dynasty, demanding tribute, signing treaties, and even taking royal hostages. Their confederation was vast, stretching from modern Mongolia to the edges of Persia. Yet today, few outside academic circles even know their name. Why? The answer lies partly in politics, and partly in the deliberate silence of history. When the Han dynasty regained control of the north, they not only defeated the Xiongnu on the battlefield, they began to erase their presence from public memory. Records became sparse, biased, or lost entirely. This is not just a lost civilization. This is a cultural erasure unfolding in real time centuries ago. Archaeological digs in recent decades have begun peeling back the veil. Xiongnu tombs, often filled with riches, reveal a complex society. Elite burials suggest a stratified system with noble classes, warriors, artisans, even diplomats. Some artifacts are shockingly sophisticated: Persian-style jewelry, Roman glass, and silk that predates the Silk Road's official formation. These weren't simple raiders. They were cultural brokers and empire builders. So why did they vanish so completely? Many historians suspect the collapse wasn't sudden. A faction splintered south into Chinese territory, while another merged westward with Turkic tribes. But with no written language of their own, their story was told, often distorted, by their enemies. Without their own voice in history, they became easy to silence. Even their royal tombs were hidden, left untouched for millennia, as if time itself conspired to bury them. One of the greatest mysteries surrounding the Xiongnu is what became of them. Scholars have long debated whether they were the ancestors of the Huns, those same nomadic invaders who terrorized Rome under Attila. Linguistic patterns, burial styles, and genetic data hint at a link. Both use similar horse-riding tactics, composite bows, and mobile warfare. Some historians theorize a Western Xiongnu faction became the ruling elite of the Huns. If true, then the fall of Rome is a distant echo of China's forgotten war. Imagine, the same people who once stormed Chinese borders may have later brought down the Western Roman Empire. Yet because the Huns wrote no chronicles, and the Xiongnu's records are filtered through enemies, the connection remains blurry. What if history missed a civilizational bridge that reshaped both East and West? If so, it would mean the Xiongnu never truly vanished. They simply changed their mask. The Han dynasty's obsession with record-keeping preserved their own greatness, but allowed them to control the legacy of others. When the Han finally broke the Xiongnu Confederation, they didn't just win militarily, they seized the narrative. They portrayed the Xiongnu as treacherous, primitive, disorganized, but archaeological evidence contradicts this entirely. What the Han called tribute may have actually been trade. What they called raids were often counter-offensives. In the imperial archives, truth was filtered through politics. And as later dynasties rose, they had little reason to preserve the story of a rival nomadic empire. Over centuries, texts decayed, records disappeared, and soon the Xiongnu became nothing more than a footnote. Their legacy wasn't lost by chance, it was systematically unremembered. A power erased not by fire but by ink, yet the steppe remembers. Even as written history fades, the land holds secrets, From windswept kurgans to sunken tombs, clues are surfacing. Recent discoveries of Xiongnu women in warrior graves challenge long-held gender roles. DNA testing links their descendants to modern Central Asian populations. Oral histories among steppe peoples still whisper of ancestors who once ruled vast territories. The Xiongnu may be gone from textbooks, but they persist in the blood and bones of millions. Their story, once silenced, is being revived, not by conquerors, but by science. In uncovering the truth, we confront a deeper question. How many other civilizations were erased because they didn't control the pen? As we dig beneath history's official version, we find not just forgotten empires, but our own blind spots. The Xiongnu were not shadows, we just refused to look for them. In the heart of Central Africa, long before colonial maps or kingdoms, a remarkable civilization thrived on the banks of the Chari River. Known today as the Sao, they were artisans, warriors, and spiritualists who built fortified settlements and crafted metalwork rivaling anything in the ancient world. But ask most people about them, and you'll hear silence. The Sao left no written records, and later empires claimed their legacy as their own. Only fragments remain, bronze sculptures, carved stone heads, and oral legends scattered among the ethnic groups of Chad and northern Cameroon. What happened to the Sao? Were they wiped out, assimilated, or simply ignored by historians too focused on the Nile and the Niger? As we follow their trail through artifacts and oral traditions, we uncover a society whose mastery of bronze and spiritual symbolism hints at a forgotten African power erased not by time, but by indifference. What made the Sao unique wasn't just their bronze casting, it was what they chose to immortalize in metal. They didn't create tools of conquest, they crafted symbols of identity, animals, human faces, warriors in ceremonial dress. These weren't mere decorations, they were totems of status and memory. The craftsmanship suggests a deep understanding of metallurgy, long before such skills were thought to exist in Central Africa. And unlike many societies, the Sao buried their dead with care, alongside masks, figurines, and sacred symbols. These weren't just burials, they were biographies carved in bronze. Yet despite this rich material legacy, European explorers dismissed their remains as curiosities. Colonial archaeologists often credited these works to later Islamic kingdoms, ignoring local oral histories that spoke of a vanished ancestor people, the Sao. The evidence was there. No one cared to look closely. The Sao's memory survives today not in textbooks, but in stories. Among the Kotoko, Kanembu, and Muslim peoples, tales speak of the Sao as giants, literally and metaphorically. They could walk without touching the ground, some elders say, a poetic way to describe their advanced knowledge. Many believe the Sao were absorbed into the Kanem-Bornu Empire, their knowledge folded into the power structures that followed. But what if this absorption was more of an erasure? As Islam spread through the Sahel, pre-Islamic beliefs were often suppressed, their symbols defaced. Some Sao artifacts were buried deliberately, either to protect them from destruction or to hide them from view. Over time, even local rulers began referring to the Sao in mythic terms, as if they never truly existed. What began as a memory became a legend, and what was once a kingdom faded into folklore. Recent archaeological digs are rewriting what we thought we knew about Central African history. Beneath layers of Islamic cities and colonial ruins, entire Sao towns are being uncovered. Circular dwellings, intricate drainage systems, and storage pits filled with broken bronze idols. Carbon dating places some Sao settlements as early as the 6th century BCE, contemporary with early Rome. That timeline alone disrupts the colonial myth that sub-Saharan Africa had no complex societies before Islam. But even now, funding for Sao research is limited. Museums in Europe house hundreds of Sao artifacts, yet label them as unknown African origin. The legacy of cultural dismissal persists. The Sao weren't primitive tribes, they were metallurgists, urban planners, and spiritual leaders. And their erasure wasn't accidental, it was the result of centuries of neglect by both colonizers and post-colonial scholars focused elsewhere. Today, the Sao remain both everywhere and nowhere. Their influence lives on in regional art, religious customs and oral traditions, but their name has all but vanished from historical consciousness. Their bronze statues sit behind glass in foreign capitals, severed from their story. Yet beneath the soil of Chad and Cameroon, more secrets lie waiting to tell a history that doesn't begin with conquest, but with creativity. The Sao challenge our assumptions about what civilizations look like and who gets remembered. They force us to ask, how many cultures have we erased by looking in the wrong direction? How many legacies have we buried not with shovels but with silence? The Sao deserve more than footnotes. They deserve recognition as one of Africa's great early civilizations, pioneers in metal, art and identity. In reclaiming their story, we recover a piece of humanity's larger forgotten soul. In southern Spain, where the Guadalquivir River meets the Atlantic, lies a riddle whispered through the ages. Tartessos, a name shrouded in myth, half historical, half legendary. Described by Greek writers as a wealthy kingdom of silver and gold, Tartessos dazzled Mediterranean traders before vanishing from history around the 6th century BCE. For centuries, scholars dismissed it as mere myth, until fragments began surfacing, temple ruins, buried harbour walls, and strange inscriptions that don't match Phoenician or Latin script. Was Tartessos a real kingdom? And if so, why did it disappear so completely? Some say a cataclysm swallowed it, like a Spanish Atlantis. Others believe it was erased politically, snuffed out by rival empires or absorbed so thoroughly it lost its name. To uncover Tartessos is to pull at the seams of European history itself and find a forgotten civilization beneath the bedrock of empire. Recent excavations have turned legend into reality. In southwestern Spain, archaeologists have unearthed monumental Tartessian buildings with intricate courtyards, raised altars, and signs of ritual sacrifice. These weren't rustic settlements. They were planned, ceremonial centres. Their architecture suggests a unique fusion, native Iberian styles blended with Eastern Mediterranean influences, likely from Phoenician traders. Gold artifacts, ivory and exotic resins hint at long-distance trade networks. Tartessos wasn't isolated, it was cosmopolitan. And then, silence. Around 500 BCE, Tartessian sites were suddenly abandoned, temples burned or ritually closed. What caused this? There's no record of war, no volcanic ash, no plague pits. Some believe Tartessos was targeted, not by nature, but by rivals. As Carthage expanded and the Greeks moved west, this powerful seafaring kingdom may have been intentionally erased, its ports repurposed, its name stripped from maps. Classical writers remembered Tartessos, but just barely. Herodotus spoke of a king named Arganthonios, who ruled for 80 years and welcomed the Greeks warmly. Later, texts mention a land of abundant metal, where silver is so plentiful they make furniture from it. But as Rome rose, the name Tartessos all but vanished. In its place came Turdetani, a people likely descended from the Tartessians, now fully Romanized and stripped of distinction. Even their language was lost, replaced by Latin. This wasn't just conquest, it was identity laundering. What once stood as a proud Iberian kingdom became background noise in Roman history. And because Tartessos never had a script of its own, or one we can recognize, its voice fell silent. We rely on second-hand accounts, each more mythologized than the last, like trying to understand a symphony from a broken echo. Some believe the final resting place of Tartessos lies beneath the marshes of Doñana National Park. Satellite images show strange geometric patterns beneath the wetlands, circles, rectangles, and ridged lines consistent with man-made structures. Could this be the port city that Herodotus wrote about? Geophysical surveys suggest a major event, perhaps a tsunami or river shift, altered the region's geography. The idea that Tartessos sank isn't pure fantasy, it's scientifically plausible. But official excavations are slow. Environmental protections and political sensitivities have stalled deeper digs. Meanwhile, Local legends speak of a city swallowed by the sea, its treasures still buried beneath the mud. Whether natural disaster or human design ended Tartessos, the truth remains sealed beneath layers of silt and secrecy. It's not just the city that was buried, it was the memory of a people. Tartessos was once the shining coast of ancient Iberia, rich in silver, steeped in spirituality, and connected to a world far wider than we thought. Its disappearance wasn't an accident, it was a rebranding of the past. What we now call myths may be censored memories, truths deemed inconvenient by the empires that followed. But Tartessos hasn't given up all its secrets. Every year, new artifacts surface, new inscriptions are decoded, and the lines between history and legend blur a little more. The question isn't whether Tartessos existed, it's how many others like it lie beneath our feet. Civilizations erased not by nature, but by the narrative. To remember Tartessos is to resist forgetting. It's a reminder that even in Europe's heartland, shadow civilizations shaped the story long before the spotlight arrived. Long before the grandeur of the Shang dynasty, before dragons adorned jade and emperors claimed the mandate of heaven, a mysterious people thrived in the harsh valleys of northwestern China. Known today as the Qijia culture, they emerged around 2200 BCE and vanished just 4 centuries later, leaving behind no writing, no mythology, only silence. Yet what they did leave behind has stunned archaeologists. Sophisticated metal tools, rudimentary bronze artifacts, and a level of craftsmanship that predates China's traditional Bronze Age timeline. These were not primitive villagers. They were pioneers of metallurgy, blending cultural influences from Central Asia with Chinese innovation. But their story is hardly known, buried in remote dig reports and rarely taught even in China. Who were the Qijia, and why did this proto-civilization vanish from history just as bronze began to shape the world? The Qijia lived in settlements that defied their rugged environment, well-organized villages with pottery workshops and animal pens. Their pottery was advanced, often red and geometrically incised, fired at consistent temperatures that suggest control over heat and technique. But the real shock came when metallurgists tested their bronze tools. These were among the earliest bronze objects found in East Asia, predating the Shang by centuries. The Qijia didn't just adopt metallurgy, they may have introduced it to the region. Some believe their techniques came from contact with Central Asian steppe cultures, bridging Eurasian innovations with Chinese traditions. This cultural synthesis points to a forgotten east-west corridor of ideas, long before the Silk Road. And yet, the Qijia's name is absent from China's founding myths. Their contributions were erased, not by time alone, but by dynastic narratives that demanded clear beginnings and glorious empires. What makes the Qijia even more intriguing is how much they don't fit the standard Chinese historical narrative. Their burial practices resemble those of Central Asian nomads. Their bronze techniques share features with cultures as far as modern-day Kazakhstan, and yet their settlements were distinctly Chinese, agricultural, permanent, and socially structured. The Qijia challenge the idea of an isolated China. They represent a hybrid zone where technologies and beliefs flowed freely across the mountains. But this liminal identity may have been their undoing. As more dominant powers like the Erletau and later Shang emerged in central China, the Qijia's remote, non-conforming culture may have been sidelined. No battles were recorded. No epic collapse described. Their story simply faded, quietly overwritten by a civilization that chose to begin its history elsewhere. Modern science is now doing what ancient chroniclers refused, giving the Qijia a voice. Using advanced imaging techniques, researchers have discovered mineral compositions in Qijia bronzes that match ores from thousands of kilometers away. Their ceramics show uniformity and refinement rivaling later dynasties. Even their skeletal remains suggest a diverse genetic background, evidence of long-range interaction. Yet these findings remain buried in obscure journals, barely trickling into public consciousness. Why? Because the Qijia story disrupts a clean timeline. It suggests China's Bronze Age wasn't born in the Central Plains, but sparked in its margins, and for historians used to orderly dynastic charts, the Kijia are a messy truth, early, influential, and inconvenient. But every excavated pot, every melted fragment of bronze is a whispered protest from the past. We were here first. The Kijia culture reminds us that history isn't always written by the victors. Sometimes it's simply lost between dynasties, too early to be remembered, too late to fit the narrative. They were builders, metallurgists, and cultural bridges, thriving in one of the world's most challenging landscapes. And yet, for thousands of years, they were invisible. Their silence tells us more than their tools ever could about how history selects, excludes, and distorts. Today we begin to listen again, not just to the dynasties that ruled, but to the forgotten alchemists who forged the future in valleys no one thought to look. The Kijia may have vanished, but their bronze still gleams, waiting for a story that no longer begins at the center, but at the edges. Tucked away in the misty highlands of Yemen lies the ghost of a forgotten empire, the kingdom of Himyar. Flourishing from the 2nd century BCE to the 6th century CE, Himyar controlled the incense trade routes that once made Arabia indispensable to Rome, Persia, and India. Its cities were carved into mountaintops, its kings spoke a now-lost language, and its legacy was swept aside when Islam reshaped the region. But Himyar was no ordinary kingdom. It was a crossroads of religions, where pagan gods, Judaism, and eventually Christianity collided in an unlikely imperial experiment. Despite its wealth and influence, Himyar has been largely ignored by mainstream history. Why? Perhaps because its rise and fall don't fit the neat arcs of conquest or decline. Himyar didn't die in battle. It was absorbed, erased, and buried under centuries of silence. But its ruins remain, whispering of a world Arabia once ruled. Himyar's power didn't come from swords, it came from scent. Frankincense and myrrh, burned in temples from Athens to Delhi, flowed through Himyarite territory. They controlled the incense trade with an iron grip, taxing every caravan and minting their own coinage. Their capital, Zafar, was a bustling centre of commerce, religion, and diplomacy. Yet, little of this is found in textbooks. Himyar rarely appears in Roman records and is mostly absent from early Islamic chronicles. Why would a kingdom so crucial to global trade be so thoroughly forgotten? One reason may be its ideological ambiguity. Himyar's elites converted to Judaism in the 4th century, a bold political move that aligned them against Christian, Byzantium, and Zoroastrian Persia. For over a century, Jewish kings ruled an Arabian kingdom, fusing local traditions with Hebrew scripture. To later historians, this confounding mix made Himyar an uncomfortable anomaly, easier to exclude than explain. The Himyarite kingdom reached a dramatic turning point under King Du-Nuwas, who ruled in the early 6th century. A devout Jew, Du-Nuwas launched a brutal campaign against Christians in the city of Najran, retaliating for Byzantine-backed incursions. The massacre shocked the Christian world. In response, the kingdom of Aksum, across the Red Sea in Ethiopia, invaded Himyar with support from Byzantium. Du-Nuwas died, possibly by riding his horse into the sea, a tragic end that echoed through the region. After the invasion, Himyar became a Christian puppet state, but its glory was over. Within a generation, it would be absorbed into the growing Islamic world. Himyar's records were suppressed, its language fell into disuse, and its Jewish identity was replaced by dominant new narratives. What remains is a kingdom lost between empires, forgotten by design, not accident. Only recently has Himyar begun to re-emerge. Excavations at Zafar have revealed complex temples, bathhouses, and inscriptions in the nearly forgotten Musnad script. These texts are just now being translated, offering glimpses into a kingdom that governed through religious pluralism and trade rather than sheer force. Yet, many of the sites remain underexplored due to regional instability. Wars have stalled archaeology, and looters have sold priceless artifacts on the black market. Despite these setbacks, the pieces are coming together. Himyar wasn't just a regional power, it was a civilizational hinge. where South Arabia connected Africa, Persia, and the Mediterranean. Its disappearance wasn't a collapse. It was an intentional overwrite, an imperial edit to the script of history. Himyar was erased, not forgotten. Its kings walked among prophets. Its soldiers guarded incense trails that scented the temples of Rome, and its scribes wrote in a language we are only beginning to understand again. But when history was rewritten, Himyar didn't fit. Too religiously complex, too politically independent, too foreign for Arab and Western historians alike, and so it was buried, not in sand, but in silence. Today, each unearthed inscription and broken coin speaks to a legacy nearly lost. The kingdom of Himyar was Arabia's missing chapter, one of faith, fire, and forgotten power. And perhaps, by remembering it, we can see history not as a straight line, but as a woven tapestry, where even the faintest threads still shine. In the myths of ancient Sumer, a rival land appears again and again, Aratta. Described as fabulously wealthy, filled with gold, lapis lazuli, and sacred temples, Aratta was the counterpart to Uruk, home of the legendary king Enmerkar. Sumerian epics detail diplomatic missions, magical duels, and divine interventions in their interactions. But here's the mystery. There is no archaeological consensus on Aratta's existence. Unlike Troy or Babylon, Aratta has left no confirmed ruins, no clear markers, and yet it occupies a central role in Sumerian mythology. Was it a real city, swallowed by time, a metaphor for divine struggle, or a historical culture later mythologized beyond recognition? The Aratta enigma is one of the earliest puzzles in recorded human history, where literature, archaeology, and theology collide in the desert sands of prehistory. Clues about Aratta's location have led researchers far beyond Mesopotamia. Some believe it lay in the Zagros Mountains of Iran, citing trade routes and mineral wealth. Others suggest connections to the Indus Valley civilization, noting similarities in craftsmanship and religious motifs. Ancient texts describe a journey of many days through treacherous lands to reach Aratta, implying a distant and elevated region. Was Aratta a real kingdom obscured by time, or a literary stand-in for distant cultural others? Like Atlantis, Aratta may represent both a real place and an idealized civilization. Its wealth and mystery made it the perfect foil to Uruk's ambitions, and yet no definitive excavation has confirmed its identity. Aratta's location remains a blank spot on the historical map, frustrating scholars and fueling imagination. In the Sumerian tale, Enmerkar and the Lord of Aratta, diplomacy unfolds like drama. The king of Uruk sends messengers demanding tribute and submission from Aratta, but the Lord of Aratta resists, offering riddles instead of surrender. What follows is a series of poetic standoffs, magical spells, and appeals to Inanna, the goddess of love and war, patron of both cities. Some scholars interpret these stories as symbolic battles between rival ideologies, settled cities versus distant highland cultures, order versus wild abundance. Others see them as echoes of real political conflicts, mythologized through poetry. Aratta may have been a memory of a powerful early rival, forgotten in time but preserved in story. Its resistance to Uruk's dominance suggests a culture of equal sophistication, one not yet found in the archaeological record, but deeply etched in the Sumerian mind. What truly sets Aratta apart in the epics is its material and spiritual wealth. Sumerian texts claim Aratta had enough lapis lazuli to cover temple walls, gold to forge entire statues, and divine favor unmatched even by Uruk. These descriptions mirror the goods actually found in Mesopotamia, many of which originated from far-off lands. Could Aratta have been an ancient trade hub, supplying the Sumerians with the treasures they so prized? Its wealth may have been real, even if its name was poetic. Like El Dorado or Shambhala, Aratta may have represented a cultural memory of a faraway abundant land, known but not controlled, and perhaps the very act of mythologizing Aratta was a way for Sumerians to reckon with civilizations they could not dominate or fully understand. The enigma of Arata reminds us that not all history is carved in stone. Some of it is whispered in myth. Whether Arata was real, metaphorical, or something in between, it served a powerful role in shaping how the Sumerians saw themselves. It was their rival, their mirror, their unreachable other. And in a strange twist, while Uruk's ruins remain and its history well documented, Arata still haunts the scholarly imagination, unclaimed and undiscovered. Its silence poses a tantalizing question. What if the greatest rival of the first known civilization left behind no ruins, only stories? In the end, perhaps Arata wasn't just a place. It was a challenge, a reminder that for all our knowledge of ancient history, much still lies hidden beyond the edge of the map. Across deserts, jungles and ice, traces of forgotten civilizations lie waiting beneath our feet. They weren't all conquered. Some adapted, vanished, or were absorbed, left out of history because they didn't fit the dominant narrative. The world remembers empires with armies and monuments, but it often forgets those that ruled through trade, spirituality, or silence. The civilizations we've explored, Nixtun Chich, the Sao, Himyar, Arata, each thrived in unique ways, only to be edited out of the historical script. Why? Sometimes it was geopolitics, sometimes religion, sometimes simple chance. But in every case, their stories remind us that history is not a complete record. It's a patchwork of what was preserved, what was discovered, and what was allowed to survive. As we uncover new ruins and decipher ancient scripts, we begin to realize how much of our shared human story is still hidden. Lost civilizations aren't just romantic relics. They're essential chapters in the book of who we are. Every forgotten kingdom challenges us to rethink what civilization means. Was it urban planning, divine kingship, commerce, or oral tradition? The more we discover, the more the past pushes back against our assumptions. These shadow civilizations whisper truths we once refused to hear, that power takes many forms, that memory is fragile, and that the victors don't always get the last word. The silence of these cultures isn't the end of their story. It's a call to listen deeper. Civilizations rise and fall. Some leave behind pyramids, others a single myth, but all of them matter. Each forgotten culture is a missing piece of the human mosaic, waiting to be recognized, remembered, and reinterpreted. As our tools improve and our curiosity deepens, the shadows of history begin to stir. What else lies beneath the soil, beneath the sea, or buried in unread scripts? In the coming years, some of these mysteries may finally be solved. Others may remain forever out of reach. But one thing is certain: the forgotten still speak. And if we listen closely, their echoes just might change everything we thought we knew. Long before Japan became a unified empire, rival kingdoms vied for power across the archipelago. Among them was a formidable contender, the Kingdom of Kibi. Located in what is now Okayama Prefecture, Kibi was once equal in strength to the rising Yamato court. But while Yamato would become the cradle of Imperial Japan, Kibi faded into obscurity. Why? What caused one culture to dominate while the other was erased? The story of Kibi isn't just one of rivalry. It's a tale of political suppression, spiritual battles, and historical amnesia. Only fragments remain: massive burial mounds, mysterious artifacts, and half-erased legends. But these traces whisper of a kingdom once strong enough to challenge the very foundation of Japan's monarchy. And perhaps, if history had twisted just slightly, it would be Kibi, not Yamato, written in the emperor's bloodline. One of the few things left that prove Kibi's former might are its enormous burial mounds, kofun, that rival those of the Yamato kings. The Tsukuriyama kofun is particularly telling. Over 350 meters long, it's among the largest in Japan, suggesting a leader of immense power. And buried within were not crude relics, but sophisticated bronze mirrors, iron swords, and ornamental armor. These weren't simple tribal chieftains. Kibi had its own system of rulers, rituals, and likely even written records now lost to time. Yet the Kibi rulers were curiously absent from the official Yamato chronicles. Were they omitted by accident or by design? As we dig deeper into these tombs, we unearth not just material wealth, but a suppressed narrative. A parallel civilization that stood shoulder to shoulder with Yamato before being politically and spiritually absorbed. Some believe the conflict between Kibi and Yamato was more than territorial. It was ideological. Evidence suggests that Kibi had distinct religious traditions that may have clashed with Yamato's early Shinto system. One figure stands out: Kibi no Makibi, a noble from Kibi who later rose to power in the Yamato court. He studied in Tang, China and brought Confucianism, astronomy and Chinese script to Japan. But why would Yamato allow a Kibi man to become so influential, unless it was a strategy to absorb Kibi's culture through diplomacy? Perhaps Makibi was the bridge or the pawn in a soft conquest. Over time, Kibi's spiritual systems were erased, its people folded into the expanding Yamato identity. What we now call Japanese tradition may in part be Kibi's legacy, quietly hidden in plain sight. One of the strongest living echoes of Kibi's lost kingdom is the Kibitsu Shrine. Its architecture, unlike any other in Japan, hints at forgotten ceremonial practices. Legends speak of ogres, curses, and powerful priests, tales that may be coded memories of political battles. According to myth, Yamato sent a prince to suppress a monstrous threat in Kibi, who then built a shrine atop its remains. But what if this wasn't folklore, but metaphor? What if the ogre was Kibi's power, and the shrine was Yamato's flag planted over a fallen kingdom? Even today, the Kibitsu corridor resembles a march into memory, a long hallway into a culture forced underground. Ancient roads between Kibi and Yamato suggest they were more entangled than we assume. Trade partners, rivals, maybe even allies before the tide turned. Why did Kibi vanish from mainstream Japanese history? Was it conquered, or did it dissolve quietly into the Yamato mythos? Modern scholars propose a strategic absorption, an erasure through cultural rewriting. Unlike dramatic wars, Kibi's downfall was a soft vanishing. Its leaders were co-opted, its beliefs overwritten, and its name faded from the scrolls. But the soil remembers. Each unearthed artifact, each whispered legend, rebuilds the ghost of a nation nearly forgotten. As we re-examine Japan's formation, Kibi resurfaces, not as a defeated footnote, but as a suppressed pillar of origin. Its story isn't just historical, it's a reminder of how power shapes memory, and how easily a kingdom can be erased from the pages, but not from the land. In the end, the mystery of Kibi forces us to ask, who else has been written out of history? Before the Inca ruled the Andes, another empire quietly shaped the fate of Peru, the Wari. Flourishing between 500 and 1000 CE, this forgotten civilization built vast cities, engineered mountain highways, and ruled over diverse cultures. But what makes the Wari remarkable isn't what they left behind, it's what they didn't. Unlike the Maya or Inca, the Wari left no grand temples or detailed chronicles. And yet, they governed a territory spanning 1,000 miles. How did they do it? Archaeologists have uncovered a shadowy form of imperial control, subtle, systemic, and nearly invisible. The Wari may have created the world's first soft power empire. Instead of conquest by blood, they may have ruled by infrastructure, culture, and quiet domination. As we dig deeper, a strange question emerges. Did the Wari invent a form of control more effective and more mysterious than any known empire? Piquilacta, a sprawling Wari outpost southeast of Cusco, offers our first clue. From the sky, it appears strangely modern. Perfect rectangles, uniform neighborhoods, and high walls. But here's the twist. Archaeologists found no palaces, no temples, no central square. This wasn't a city of spectacle, it was a city of control. Every inch seems planned, not for religious awe, but for behavioral discipline. Gates restrict movement. Windows are rare. The design channels people through checkpoints and narrow passages. Scholars believe the Wari used urban planning to manage populations, encouraging conformity, limiting rebellion. Imagine a society where the architecture itself makes you obedient. Without writing or armies, The Wari may have programmed behavior into the cities they built, and Pikilakta is just one piece of the puzzle. Another tool in the Wari's hidden control system? Water. In the Andean highlands, survival hinges on its flow, and the Wari mastered it. Across their empire, they built sophisticated irrigation systems that redistributed water across entire regions. But these weren't just agricultural tools. They were instruments of power. Control the water, and you control the people. Unlike warlords who ruled with force, the Wari may have ruled by engineering dependency. Cities thrived as long as they obeyed the system. Step out of line, and the canals might dry up. Water became loyalty. This hydraulic network spanned hundreds of miles and stitched together dozens of cultures, and like their cities, it was quiet, invisible, and unrelenting. The Wari didn't need overseers. They had infrastructure that governed in silence. Beyond stone and water, the Wari exerted influence through symbols, woven into textiles, carved into ceramics, and stamped across their empire. Their art was repetitive, almost corporate. Stylized faces, standardized patterns, rigid designs. Unlike the individualistic flair of other Andean cultures, Wari aesthetics were uniform, even cold. Scholars believe this wasn't art for beauty, it was branding, a visual language of control. These motifs appeared from coastal outposts to highland citadels, silently uniting diverse regions under a single visual order. The message was clear: you are part of Wari now. There was no need to rewrite your language, just your symbols. This visual propaganda helped form a shared identity, even if people didn't understand it. In an empire with no written law, the image became the enforcer, and then, just as silently as they ruled, the Wari disappeared. Around 1000 CE, their cities were abandoned. No signs of invasion, no mass graves. Their infrastructure decayed, their water dried up. Some believe a mega drought fractured their network. Others think the system, so dependent on central control, simply collapsed under its own weight. The Wari vanished, leaving behind ruins no one understood. When the Inca rose centuries later, they inherited the Wari road system, city patterns, even their sacred iconography. Yet they spoke of the Wari only in fragments. It's as if the Wari designed their own erasure, perfect control, followed by perfect silence. But in today's world, where systems govern behavior invisibly, the Wari story feels uncannily modern. Perhaps their legacy isn't in what they built, but in how they ruled, and how much of it still echoes beneath our feet. Long before the rise of Srivijaya or Majapahit, there existed a mysterious maritime power, the Malayu Kingdom. Mentioned in 7th century Chinese records as a thriving trade hub in Sumatra, the Malayu Kingdom flourished along the Batanghari River in Jambi. But unlike its successors, Malayu left behind no stone palaces or grand inscriptions. Its story is buried beneath jungle and silt, scattered across foreign chronicles and oral legends. Who were the Malayu people? How did they control trade routes between India and China? And why did their empire fade so completely that even regional histories barely speak of them? What we do know suggests a sophisticated society with deep spiritual roots and far-reaching economic power. And yet, it vanished almost without a trace. In this episode, we uncover the fragmented legacy of an empire swallowed by jungle, erased by rivals, and forgotten by time. In the 7th century, Chinese envoys wrote of a kingdom called Molo Yu that sent tribute to the Tang dynasty. This mysterious state matched the region of modern-day Jambi, Sumatra, right where the Batanghari River meets the sea. Situated along the maritime Silk Road, Malayu was ideally placed to dominate shipping lanes between East and South Asia. Yet unlike later empires that ruled with force, Malayu's power was economic and spiritual. It became a center for Buddhist pilgrims and Indianized culture. Sanskrit inscriptions and early Buddhist artifacts reveal a cosmopolitan society that connected monasteries in Nalanda to ports in Canton. But for every discovery, there are 10 unanswered questions. Why do the records suddenly fall silent? Was Malayu absorbed by Srivijaya, or erased by it? Was it a rival crushed or a parent kingdom sacrificed to history? the Muaro Jambi temple complex may hold the key to understanding Malayu's lost capital. Hidden beneath thick vegetation until the 20th century, this sprawling site is one of Southeast Asia's largest ancient Buddhist complexes. Over 80 temple mounds stretch along the river, far more than any single Srivijayan site. But here's the enigma. Muaro Jambi doesn't match Srivijaya's known architectural style. The layout, materials, and inscriptions suggest an earlier civilization, possibly Malayu itself. Some historians now argue that Srivijaya did not build Muaro Jambi, but inherited or even conquered it. If true, this site is a fossilized blueprint of a forgotten empire. Why would a kingdom capable of such monumental architecture be ignored by local legends? Perhaps the victors wrote the narrative, while the vanquished were buried, both literally and historically. Malayu was more than a trade port. It was a spiritual sanctuary. The mix of Buddhist, Hindu, and local animist practices created a hybrid culture that thrived on diversity. Inscriptions found near Jambi speak of monks, scholars, and kings coexisting in ritual harmony. Bronze statues and ritual tools show Indian and local influences interwoven. The kingdom may have acted as a religious conduit, translating Indian thought for the Malay archipelago. But this openness could have also been its undoing. As regional powers grew more militaristic, Malayu's soft power approach may have left it vulnerable. Srivijaya, with its naval strength, likely took control of the trade routes and possibly the spiritual centres. The temples were absorbed, rebranded, or abandoned. Over time, the name Malayu became a cultural identity, while its origin as a kingdom faded from memory. Today, the name Malayu echoes through Malaysia, Indonesia, and Brunei, not as an empire, but as an ethnic and cultural identity. Yet few realize that it may trace back to a kingdom that predates Srivijaya itself. The Malayu kingdom didn't collapse, it transformed. Its people, language, and beliefs were absorbed into newer powers, their origins quietly rewritten. But the stones of Muaro Jambi still whisper. The forgotten temples, half covered in moss, hint at a time when rivers were highways, and the Malayu were masters of them. Perhaps the greatest mystery isn't how the kingdom fell, but how its legacy survived by becoming invisible. In this lost empire, we find not just ruins, but the roots of Southeast Asian civilization, hidden in plain sight. The Malayu kingdom may be lost, but its spirit sails on, disguised as history itself. In the dusty hills of eastern Ethiopia lie the shattered remains of a civilization so advanced, locals believed giants must have built it. This was the land of the Hala people, a mysterious culture known only through legend, scattered ruins, and whispered tales of enormous strength and strange knowledge. For centuries, Ethiopian folklore spoke of towering men and women who erected stone cities, carved wells into bedrock, and forged iron tools with uncanny skill. But for generations, historians dismissed these tales as myth. That changed in 2017 when archaeologists uncovered an ancient city at Hala, complete with intricate mosques, imported Chinese ceramics, and underground tombs. Was this the lost city of the Hala people? Who were these so-called giants, and how did they vanish without a trace? This is the story of the Hala, Ethiopia's forgotten architects of legend. What stunned researchers wasn't just the city's complexity, it was its global reach. Hala wasn't an isolated tribal village, it was a cosmopolitan hub, part of an early Islamic trade network stretching from Africa to the Middle East and China. Excavations revealed coral jewellery from the Indian Ocean, Chinese porcelain, and coins from Egypt. The Hala people were connected, literate, and technologically advanced. Yet despite this sophistication, no written records of them survive. Why? Some believe they were an early Islamic African society whose identity was absorbed into later kingdoms. Others suspect climate shifts or regional conflicts erased their cities and memory. Still, local traditions remained, insisting that the Hala were not just ordinary humans, but giants. Could this folklore preserve a distorted memory of real people who simply lived centuries ahead of their time? The most enduring clue to the Hala's legendary status lies in their engineering. Locals point to immense stone blocks precisely fitted without mortar and say, only giants could build this. The wells dug deep into volcanic rock, the hidden tombs, and the sophisticated city layout suggest a society of planners and architects, masters of both stone and steel. Iron smelting furnaces found nearby reveal early metallurgy techniques, rare in the region. The myth of giants may reflect awe toward these builders' unmatched skills. But could the Hala have been something more? A multicultural guild of artisans and traders with secret knowledge of architecture and trade routes? As with many lost cultures, absence of evidence fuels mystery, and the Hala remain tantalizingly elusive. Who built these cities, and why did they disappear? Even as the Hala people vanished from written history, they lived on in story. In the towns of eastern Ethiopia, elders still speak of the Hala giants, being so tall they could step over houses, so strong they could lift stone with one hand. Some tales say the Hala offended God and were turned to stone, while others claim they simply walked into the mountains and never returned. These legends aren't just fantasy, they reflect cultural memory passed down for centuries. Perhaps the Hala were simply advanced city builders whose tools and methods seemed supernatural to later generations. Or perhaps, like other forgotten civilizations, they were erased by time, war, and nature. Whatever the truth, their legacy etched itself into the psyche of the region. In a way, the Hala became eternal, giants not in size, but in memory. Today, the ruins of Hala are silent, but piece by piece, archaeologists are unearthing a new vision of East African history, one where the so-called giants were simply brilliant engineers, spiritual leaders, and master traders. The Hala people challenge our assumptions that Africa's great civilizations were only coastal, only recent, or only shaped by outsiders. Hala proves otherwise, and yet, for all we now know, much remains buried. No one knows where the Hala originated, or what name they gave themselves. All that survives is what others remembered: stone walls, metal tools, and the echoes of awe. The Hala may be gone, but in their disappearance they've become something more: a legend, a question, a mystery still waiting to be solved. Perhaps the giants never left. Perhaps they just built their legacy into the earth and let time do the rest. Before pyramids rose in West Africa or empires formed on the savannas, there was Nok. Flourishing as early as 1500 BCE in what is now central Nigeria, the Nok culture is one of sub-Saharan Africa's earliest complex societies. Yet, despite its significance, it remained unknown until the 1940s, when tin miners stumbled upon hauntingly expressive terracotta heads buried deep in the soil. These weren't crude relics. They were masterworks. With hollow eyes, elaborate hairstyles, and stylized features, the sculptures sparked a mystery. Who were the Nok people, and why did their entire civilization vanish without a trace? The Nok left behind no written language, no monumental ruins, only these lifelike terracotta sculptures, often discovered by accident. Their craftsmanship shows astonishing sophistication. Hollow core construction, complex ornamentation, and clear ritualistic design. Archaeologists believe these figures may have served as ancestral symbols or spiritual guardians. But beyond their aesthetic beauty lies a technological surprise. The Nok were among the first in sub-Saharan Africa to smelt iron. Long before European contact, the Nok were forging tools and weapons, hinting at an advanced society driven by metallurgy, agriculture, and possibly trade routes yet uncharted. Iron smelting wasn't just a technological feat, it was transformative. It allowed for stronger tools, more efficient farming, and likely a social hierarchy centered around blacksmiths and artisans. Some scholars argue the Nok may have influenced later African civilizations like the Yoruba or the Kingdom of Nri. Trade goods like beads and pottery fragments suggest Nok wasn't isolated, but despite its potential connections, we still know little about its political or spiritual systems. Everything we know comes from soil. Unearthed fragments that hint at a society capable of art, science, and spiritual depth. Around 300 CE, the Nok culture mysteriously disappears from the archaeological record. There's no clear invasion, no cataclysmic event. Some believe environmental changes, soil exhaustion, desertification, or over-reliance on iron smelting led to the collapse. Others suspect they migrated, blending into emerging societies, their legacy diluted by time. Whatever the cause, the Nok's disappearance left a void in West African history, a flourishing civilization, gone, leaving behind only baked clay and rusted iron as whispers of what once was. Today, the Nok culture is being rediscovered piece by piece. Nigerian archaeologists and historians are working to reclaim this chapter of African history, long neglected by colonial narratives. Their efforts aren't just academic, they're cultural. In a world where African civilizations were often dismissed as primitive, the Nok stands as a powerful rebuttal. They created beauty from earth, forged metal from fire, and built a society that thrived for over a millennium. Though time tried to erase them, the Nok endure in their art, their innovation, and the red soil that still keeps their secrets. Zomia, a name coined not by its people, but by scholars trying to understand a mystery. Spanning over 2.5 million square kilometers of uplands in Southeast Asia, Zomia is not a single culture, language, or nation. It's a zone of resistance. For centuries, the tribes and hill peoples of Zomia, Karen, Hmong, Lahu, Aka, and dozens more, chose to live apart from lowland kingdoms and empires. They farmed steep hills, moved often, and developed ways of life that deliberately avoided being ruled. While history is usually written by centralized states, Zomia flips that script. It is the story of those who ran from civilization and survived. The peoples of Zomia weren't simply isolated, they were intentional in their avoidance. They practiced escape agriculture, cultivating crops like tubers that couldn't be taxed or easily seized by kings. They spoke multiple dialects, shifted territories, and avoided written records, ensuring no central authority could trace or control them. Estates in the valleys rose and fell, Chinese dynasties, Burmese kings, colonial powers. Zomia remained elusive. Some scholars describe this as state evasion, a survival strategy that values autonomy over empire. In the highlands, freedom was more important than progress, or at least progress as the lowlands defined it. To the lowlands, Zomia was always a frontier, unruly, uncivilized, and backwards. Yet these upland societies had their own forms of knowledge and complexity. Their political systems were horizontal, often egalitarian, and mobile. Leadership was negotiated, not inherited. Social cohesion came not from written law, but oral tradition, kinship, and ritual. The states below tried to conquer or incorporate Zomia again and again, but the geography itself fought back. Mountains became barriers to cavalry, forests swallowed roads, and rain turned plans to mud. Civilization didn't fail to reach Zomia. Zomia succeeded in evading it, but in the 20th and 21st centuries, Zomia's defiance is under pressure. Infrastructure, surveillance, and national borders now push deeper than ever. The very tools that allowed these communities to stay free, mobility, oral history, dispersed identity, are being eroded by roads, cell towers, and modern economies. Some groups are being absorbed into national identities they once avoided. Others struggle to preserve their traditions in a world that demands permanence and registration. The age of state evasion is narrowing, and with it, the last shadows of a world that refused to be tamed. Zomia is not just a place, it is an idea. It challenges the myth that civilization is inevitable, that states are the natural end of human society. In the hills above empires, people carved out lives of dignity and defiance, built on the principle that freedom sometimes means obscurity. Their stories aren't in textbooks or palace records, but they are written in the hills, in the songs of grandmothers, and in the silence between borders. As modernity creeps up the slopes, the question remains, can a culture still survive by staying hidden? Or has Zomia finally run out of mountains? History is full of shadows, Stories half told, civilizations lost, mysteries that refuse to fade. The past is not only written in textbooks, but whispered in forgotten ruins and hidden in ancient legends waiting to be uncovered. These underexplored tales remind us how much we still don't know about the world we live in, and how every discovery reshapes what we think we understand. If you're fascinated by the unknown and eager to journey beyond the familiar, stay curious and keep exploring. Because sometimes the greatest stories are the ones that history almost forgot. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and ring the bell for more deep dives into history's most enigmatic secrets. Until next time, keep questioning, keep searching, and never stop uncovering the past's hidden truths.